Red and Yellow Mix by Digits 27, Chapter 53. Naruto couldn't help but look across at Gaara as they walked together. Ever since they entered the land of fire, he had been reclusive. Matsuri had actually been worried enough to ask Naruto if he knew what was wrong with the Sand Wielder. Naruto had no idea, and that worried him. Before leaving for his training trip, Naruto could almost always tell what was going through Gaara's mind. Now, as they walked along the path that brought them closer to Konogakure, he couldn't find what was wrong with his friend. Hey, Gaara! The redhead didn't even look around when Naruto slunk back in the group to walk next to him. Rio, for your thoughts? Gaara looked up at the path ahead of them before sighing and looking around at his friend. A lot has changed since the Chunin exams, hasn't it? Naruto looked at his friend quizzically before nodding as he contemplated his words. I guess it has. Orochimaru, Akatsuki, hell, even me and Tayuya and you and Matsuri. Gaara just nodded as they continued along the road. It was just the five of them. The Raikage would be coming his own way. Yes, who would have thought that when I next walk through the gates of Konoha, it would be as Kasekage of the Sand Village? Not to nod again. I'm thinking of all the things that had changed for better or for worse since that eventful month. Not just that, we have both changed, both became more powerful. Not to smirk at that as he turned back towards the redhead. Yeah, but isn't that good? We have to get stronger so we can continue to protect the people close to us. And Gaara nodded solemnly, still caught up in his nostalgia. As a cage of a hidden village, he knew that better than anybody. Yes, but don't you think we could go back to those days when it was just me, you, and Tayuya? No worries except for our next mission or next prank. Naruto smiled warmly as he placed a hand on Gaara's shoulder. Not a day goes by when I don't think that Gaara. His friend turned to look at him, a little surprised. But every day I remind myself not only of what hardships I've had to face, but of what I've gained. I have Tayuya, I have Fu, I grow stronger so I can protect them, and I have the wisdom you can only earn by making mistakes. I wouldn't trade away my life for any others, just like I hope you wouldn't either. Gaara paused for a moment as he thought before he looked up at Matsuri, and an equally genuine smile appeared on his features. I know what you mean. Naruto's smile turned into a cheeky grin as he playfully placed his friend as he playfully slapped his friend on the back, and then stop being such a grump and go talk to your fiancé. Gaara shot him an annoyed look before it shifted into a tired smile. They parted as he walked forward so he could travel alongside Matsuri and Naruto, join Fu and Tayuya walking in between two of his most precious people. So what's eating Gaara? Naruto smiled as he hooked an arm around Tayuya's shoulder and letting her lean on him as they walked. He was just caught up in the past the back when it was just the three of us. I think that it's all moving a little too fast for him, realizing that we are all slowly moving apart. Tayuya looked at him strangely. What do you mean? Naruto sighed as his glance drifted down to Fu. Ever since the Chunin exams, we've had more and more responsibilities thrown on our shoulders, and ultimately it's driven us in different directions. Think about it. Back when we were inseparable, we did everything together. Nowadays, we only really see Gaara when we're in the Sand Village, and until Akatsuki are dealt with, those visits are few and far between. Tayuya huffed, pulling herself closer to Naruto as if it could be taken as if it could have it to them as well. Well, joy to you, Mr. Fucking Buzzkill. Naruto chuckled in return her gesture, pulling her even closer to him so it looked like they were joined at the hip. It's true, we'll always be friends, though it's just there's more in our lives now. Gaara has Matsuri, though. I have Fu, and we have each other. Tayuya nodded, smiling as she looked down the road that they were traveling. Traveling like a civilian was born the hell out of her, but it was the moments like these when she was pressed up against Naruto that made it lively. I guess. Naruto broke up away from her, looking down at her with his eyebrow quirking. I guess. Tayuya just shrugged. What? Naruto just shook his head in amusement. Well, maybe I'll just go to someone who appreciates me. With that, he bent down low and pulled Fu onto his back suddenly, shocking the main character team before he raced off down the path. Hey, get back here, shithead! That's my piggyback! All she could hear was Fu and Naruto's laughter as the three of them raced down the path. Gaara had his head firmly planted in his hand, while Matsuri was smiling in amusement. Now he could remember why he preferred now instead of their childhood. At least he could get some peace nowadays. Naruto walks through the streets of Konoha while the hood of his coat up, obscuring his hair and a lot of his face with its shadows. And thankfully, that seemed to stop people from staring at him at this time, and it made him wonder why he hadn't thought of this in the first place. He and Tokyo were walking on either side of Gaara and Matsuri as they were escorted through the village by a squad of Anbu operatives. Only the best for the Kazekage. With this kind of escort, it didn't take them long to reach the Hokage's office, where Tsunade was sitting behind her desk, unsurprisingly, free of her Hokage robes. It was just as well, considering Gaara had decided to come without his robes, just like he knew the Hokage wouldn't either. Instead, he wore a large red coat that was fastened at the front and covered by a beige body armor slung over one shoulder. His gourd, though, was notably missing, drawing the eye of the Hokage, who chose to say nothing. Kazekage Dono, it's good to see you. Gaara nodded politely. As it is to see you also, Hokage Dono. Tsunade smiled at the redhead's overly polite greetings, waving him off with a hand. There's no need for the extra pleasantries, Gaara. We should all be friends here. Gaara just smiled pleasantly, sitting in the chair presented to him. So I understand that you were the one to call this Council of Kage. Gaara nodded. As I have discussed with Kage Dono, it is clear Akatsuki has been given too much free rein. Something should be done before their plans begin to threaten our nations. Tsunade sat back in the chair, nodding as she glanced out at the village, her village. I believe you're right, but what would you become? What would you have us do? Akatsuki and their leader prove elusive, and we have little information on their members or practices. Gaara smiled secretively and looked towards Naruto, who nodded and stepped forward. All the details should be discussed when the other Kage get here tomorrow. I can assure you that Akatsuki have been dealt a crippling blow. Already 4 members have been dealt with. Tsunade raised her brow, leaning down onto the desk with her head propped up on her slipped fingers. And how do you know this? Gaara smiled. Two of them I have dealt with personally with Naruto's aid, a third by Naruto alone, and a fourth by Tayuya and the Jukri of the Navy. Tsunade raised an eyebrow, wondering how she hadn't heard of this yet, especially considering Jiraiya was supposed to be up to date on these matters. She also cast a very curious glance at Naruto, wondering how the boy in front of her could become powerful enough to take on an Akatsuki member alone. On a cue from Gaara, Naruto emptied out a pouch on his belt containing the Akatsuki rings he had collected, each one clattering down on the desk as Tsunade looked at them surprised. Wow, you really did it. Gaara just nodded as Naruto returned the rings to his pouch, sealing them away with his own smirk. As for the information, he continued to Tayuya, who walked forward and dropped a large file on Tayuya's desk. The young-looking blonde just groaned at the sight of more paperwork as she casually flicked through the pages inside. That file contains a complete list of the Akatsuki members, their own abilities, and last known locations, although they do tend to travel quite a bit. Tsunade nodded absently as she reached the page with Sasori, noting the large blank X through his photo. She found the same thing on Deidara, Kakasu, and Hidan's pages before she came across the last page. You have no information on their leader? Gaara shook his head while Tayuya frowned. She had done a lot to try and find out about him to know about. No, he proves to be difficult to pin down. All we have is his name, Pain. Tsunade quirked an eyebrow, again noticing the absence of a photo or really any information about the man, his abilities, or his appearance. How did you come across this information? Gaara smiled again as he leaned back into his chair. I took active measures in assuring we had operatives within Akatsuki's fold. Tsunade scowled. Jiraiya had assured her it was near impossible to infiltrate the group. She would be having words with the Toad Sage later on. Well, Kazekage Dono, this information will prove invaluable, I'm sure. Tsunade paused as she flicked past the page, moving her hand back as she examined the dossier of a member marked as Conan. It contained no photos, but it marked her abilities down as paper manipulation, which sounded awfully familiar for some reason. Now to try to look over Gaara's shoulder, Tayuya had given him descriptions of all the members before, but he had never seen the actual file before. So now they quickly pulled it to one side of the desk, figuring she could pull it over later. Well, would you care for a tour of the village, Kazekage Dono? Gaara shook his head kindly. No, I've been before, and if I forgot something, it's anything. I'm sure Naruto can help me find it. Tsunade frowned again, less noticeably this time as she once again took to examining the blonde in front of her. She feared that her sensei had made such a mistake, allowing him to leave the village. He had grown into a fine man and a finer shinobi to take on an S-rank criminal at the age of 16, and not only survive but win. It was nearly unheard of. Maybe part of that strength was because he had been allowed to leave, but Tsunade couldn't help but wish that the same results would exist if he had stayed. Yes, very well. Everyone took that as a dismissal, and Gaara politely stood before inclining his head in Tsunade's direction, to which she replied in kind. If I may, would Naruto stay for a moment to talk? Gaara looked at Naruto, who just shrugged back while the redhead turned him. I don't see a problem with that as long as I get him back in one piece. Tsunade smiled at the joke as everybody followed out the room, just leaving Tsunade and Naruto alone as the younger blonde took a seat in front of the Hokage's desk. So, what's up, Tsunade? The older blonde growled at the disrespectful way he talked up, but inside it reminded her of the little brat who had convinced her to take the position in the first place. I thought since you left the village so quickly last time you were here, we could catch up. Naruto nodded with a smile. Okay, so what do you want to talk about? He had the urge to kick up his feet on her desk, but thought that might be pushing it even for him. How about you manage to take down an S-rank criminal by yourself and fought against two others, killed them? Tsunade blinked as Naruto interrupted her. What? Naruto smirked cheesily. I was the one who killed Satoru and Deidara in the end. Tsunade just blinked again as the few Anbu in the room all looked at the cocky blonde incredulously. None of them actually believed in what he was saying, although admittedly I probably wouldn't have been able to do it without Gaara there. Tsunade sighed slightly at that, although that still made it two 16-year-olds taking down older, more experienced, and in all cases more powerful opponents, ignoring the fact that one was the Kazekage. And just how did you manage that? Naruto just smiled as he stared up at the ceiling, pulling out one of his special kunai and twirling it around his finger by the hole. All the Anbu in the room stared at it in utter disbelief, not believing for even 1 second that the kid who they were staring at, the kid who they were starting to notice look incredibly similar to the fourth, had mastered the horizon. You know me, I have my ways. Tsunade smiled warmly, just accepting the fact that out of everyone she knew, she would never truly understand Naruto. Yeah, I guess you do. Now, what's the deal between you and Taiya? Last time you were here, she seemed awfully close to you. Naruto smiled fondly as the thought about the red kid that had become so integral to his life. You guys done it yet? Naruto shot forward in his chair, the kunai spinning out of his hand as he stared at Tsunade incredulously, while the blonde Hokage just fell back in her chair, laughing furiously. Tsunade! She continued to chuckle as she wiped a tear away before leaning back over and smiling at Naruto warmly. But seriously, I'm glad for you too. Naruto was still a little shaken, but he just nodded with a weak smile. There's actually something I want to talk to you about. Two things, actually. Tsunade waited for him to continue politely as he rooted around in a pouch before drawing out the scroll he used to make all his notes about Funjitsu. He opened it up and found the notation he was looking for before presenting it to Tsunade. Have you ever seen this seal before? Tsunade looked at it with a scrutinizing eye. To her, it just looked like a few rectangles lined up with the bottom two split in half like a snake tongue. Sorry, Naruto. If you want help with seals, you should ask Jiraiya. And Naruto waved his hand, pointing to the seal again. No, I already know what it does. I just want to know where it came from. I found this on the tongue of a man who attacked me, Taiya and Fu, when we last left your village. Tsunade suddenly felt a pang in her heart as she heard Naruto refer to the leaf as her village for some reason. He was dressed like a leaf bamboo, but the mask was wrong, like it was demonized. Tsunade frowned. Naruto was giving her a description of a root operative, but that organization had been disbanded after the last Shinobi War. Sorry, Naruto, I can't help you with that. Naruto frowned before signing and putting the scroll back into his pouch. He would look it up. He would look it up again later. Okay. Well, speaking of Jiraiya, do you know where he is? I need to talk to him about something. Tsunade settled back in her chair, putting the root issue to the back of her mind for now. Why? What do you need him for? Naruto just motioned to the general area of his stomach. It's about the seal. Tsunade's eyebrows shot up in alarm as she slammed her hands down on the desk in panic. panic. What is it? Is it still weakening? Naruto quickly waved his hands out in front of him to calm the frightened Hokage down. No, nothing like that, I swear. Tsunade sat back down shakingly before gulping and releasing the breath she had been holding. Calm me, brat. Don't scare me like that. So what do you need him for anyway? Not to chuckle at seeing Tsunade freak out like that. It wasn't every day he could scare a Kage. Well, nearly. I just needed to talk to him about a few things. Nothing important. For some reason, Naruto didn't think that telling Tsunade he planned to double the Kyuubi's power and give her a physical form again was a good idea. Tsunade didn't seem convinced but leaned back in the chair anyway, still a little shocked from jumping into a conclusion. Well, he isn't in the village at the moment, but he will probably be back for the Kaki Summit. I've sent for him to act as one of my bodyguards during the meeting. Naruto nodded, although why Tsunade needed bodyguards in her own village when Anbu were swarming everywhere was beyond him. Well, it was nice talking with you, Tsunade, but I should probably catch up to Gaara and the others. Tayu's probably got herself into some kind of trouble already. Tsunade seemed a little loath to let Naruto leave, but with a small smile, she nodded, and Naruto stood up to go. He was halfway out of the door when he paused and slapped his forehead comically. Damn, I almost forgot. He suddenly vanished into thin air, shocking the Anbu present, but not as much as when he reappeared in the same distance by Tsunade's desk. The Anbu were already on alert, with their hands on their weapons, but Naruto just bent down and picked up his Fuji no Ikkyu kunai. Tsunade smirked, knowing he did that on purpose just to mess with her guards. Internally, she sighed, knowing he would have some explanation to do to the Anbu captain when her guards gave the report. Naruto walked back out again, but made sure to look straight at one of the Anbus hidden in the shadows, winking at them before he left the room. As soon as the door closed, that same Anbu, a purple-haired woman with a cat-themed mask, dropped from the roof to land in front of Tsunade's desk. Hokage-sama, was that really the force? Tsunade raised a hand in motion for the rest of the Anbu in the room to come out of hiding. Yes, that was a variation of the Horaishin Jutsu developed by Naruto himself. However, that information is not to leave the room, and I understood. Dumbo seemed hesitant. They desperately wanted to know how a 16-year-old kid had not only replicated one of the most powerful techniques ever created, but made his own version. Tsunade's eyes just narrowed as she looked over at the assembled Anbu, noticing the hesitation. Am I understood? Her tone brokered no argument this time. Understood, Hokage-sama. Tsunade just nodded as the Anbu all returned to their positions, except for the one who had first dropped down. Hokage-sama, I couldn't help but notice Naruto. He looks a lot like it. Tsunade raised her hand again, a dangerous look in her eyes. That's enough, Neko. The purple-haired woman, the face was covered, but it was obvious that her eyes were confused. But if he is, then why is he in Suna? Shouldn't he? Tsunade slammed her hands down on the table in anger, but if you looked close enough, you could see her eyes water ever so slightly. I said that's enough! Neko immediately saluted and returned to her position, but all of the Anbu in the room were now very confused about the identity of one Uzumaki Naruto. Neko especially watched the blonde-haired boy race away out of the window. Naruto Uzumaki, could it really be true Kushina sensing? Naruto rushed outside, using his seal to locate Tayuya. It took him in the direction of the gates, which he found strange. However, when he took to the rooftops, he managed to catch a glimpse of some kind of crowd gathering in the streets just inside the gates. He sprinted out as fast as he could. To the civilians, it looked like he simply materialized next to Gaara. Even the shinobi present were shocked at his speed. However, most quickly turned their attention back to the commotion at the gates, where a short-haired, pink-eyed girl and a large, brutish-looking man were demanding entrance into the village. Naruto quickly worked out what the problem was. Their headbands quickly showed the loyalty to Itagakure. Gaara had moved towards the disturbance, curious as to what the problem was. Excuse me. The leaf shinobi harassing the Iwanin looked around, dismissing the red-haired boy with a gravelly voice quickly. Suddenly, both of them found themselves enveloped up to the neck with a thin layer of sand, but not thin enough that they wouldn't be crushed if Gaara was so inclined. I said, excuse me. Everybody in the area's eyes went wide as they took in Gaara's arrival. He hadn't even moved on muscle. Immediately, he was surrounded on all sides by Leaf Shinobi with the kunai poised at his throat. For all the good that would do against his stand armor, quickly one of the Leaf Nin that recognized who Gaara was ran forward, dropping to one knee in front of the Kage. I apologize, Kazekage-sama. I assure that the ninja meant you no disrespect. All the people gathered who hadn't recognized Gaara before widened their eyes even more. Some of them whispered amongst themselves, like, Gaara Gaara just grunted, and the two ninja encased in sand dropped to the floor as their bindings retreated retreated back to Gaara's body. The sand vanished as if it were never there. They rubbed their necks painfully while Gaara dismissed them, turning his attention to the evil nin. Suddenly they parted as a very old and very small man walked out from between them. Kasakage, huh? So you're the brat they got to replace that bastard Kin no Subaku? Gaara stared down at the seemingly fair old man, knowing perfectly well who he was. Those that didn't began to whisper even louder, wondering who was brave enough to be so blatantly disrespect a former Kake. That bastard was my father, Tsuchikage Dono. There was a communal gasp amongst the other crowds, the gathered crowd, as Naruto naturally went for one of his kunai while Taiya had twitched over her fluted pouch. Likewise, the girl behind the Tsuchikage placed herself in a ready stance, while the more brutish looking man cracked his knuckles loudly. The Tsuchikage and Gaara just stared at one another, not moving for a second, neither blinking for a moment. I didn't expect you to come to Shikage Dono. The small man stared at Gaara for a bit longer as the redhead continued to stare back impassively. The tension in the air was so thick it could have been cut by a blunt kunai. Suddenly, the smaller man let out a chuckle, smiling lightly as he took in Gaara and his bodyguards. Call me Onoki. I like you, kid. You've got the... Onoki's eyes suddenly twitched as Naruto's kunai managed to reflect the light, catching his attention as in a blur of motion he raced across the street, catching most unprepared for the sudden movement. He snatched the kunai out of Naruto's hand while he had already brought the flute to her lips, and Naruto had already unsealed another prepared for a fight. You! What are you doing with this cursed weapon? Naruto looked at the old Tsuchikage curiously. He knew that Karaishin was a few technique in Iwa, but he didn't expect anything like this. He pulled his hood down so that the old man could look at his face, and all three Iwa Nina let out a simultaneous gasp, as did a few of the civilians from the Leaf Ninja. Namakase! Onoki pointed at Naruto furiously, dropping the kunai he had been holding in anger, not wanting to cause an international incident. Naruto put his hands up in almost surrounding motion, but not quite. No, I'm not Minato Namakase. He died 16 years ago. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. Onoki continued to just stare at Naruto. He had made Minato Namakase towards the end of the Third Shinobi War, and this boy, minus the whiskers, was his spitting image. There was no way the two weren't related. You just couldn't get that kind of similarities without blood relation. Who are you? Naruto tried to smile warmly, but with a powerful Kage staring him down, it proved difficult, and it came out rather strained. Like I said, I'm Naruto Uzumaki. Onoki held up a hand. Don't give me that. Who were your parents? Naruto scowled, and by this point, the guard decided to step in. I would appreciate if you would stop harassing my shinobi, Onoki Dono. The Shikage scowled in Gaara's direction. You're a shinobi. He turned back to Naruto. You are the shinobi of the leaf. Naruto shook his head quickly while Onoki shot glances between him and Gaara a few times. That is correct. Naruto is shinobi of the Sand Village, and his parentage is unknown. He has been an orphanage since birth, at least to my knowledge. Onoki seemed to catch the last part and sent a suspicious look at Gaara. What do you mean, to your knowledge? Gaara found he hadn't meant to let that slip. He was trying to avoid a conflict, and it appeared that he was failing. Naruto was born in Sunagakure. Naruto was not born in Sunagakure. He was born in Konoha, but he left at a young age, and my village took him in. Onoki seemed to be back to full alert, slowly moving back to his two bodyguards, who were currently sweating bullets, had been surrounded by so many Leaf Ninja. The crowd was silent, watching the brewing conflict as the tension nearly reached a breaking point. Is this some kind of joke? Gaara shook his head while Onoki continued to send poisonous looks in Naruto's direction. You expect me to believe that this boy is not the son of Minato Namakase when he holds a kunai of the Karaishin Jutsu and damn near looks identical to the man? The crowd seemed to have turned their full attention to Naruto now, scrutinizing him as more and more people began to open their eyes wide as they saw the similarities. The blonde felt like he was under the spotlight as he began to fiddle with the kunai nervously, which wasn't really helping. What's going on here? All attention turned to Tsunade, who had just arrived at the scene, taking it in with a one glance and gulping as she noticed Onoki staring at Naruto. Shit! Tsunade, what is the meaning of this? Who is this boy? Tsunade looked around, counting the number of Anbu operatives in the area. He is Naruto Uzumaki. Onoki shot her a murderous look as he stared right into her eyes. Who were his parents? Naruto too was now looking in Tsunade's direction, his own nervousness forgotten for the moment as he looked at her curiously. Now, Tsuchikage don't know. This isn't really the place to be discussing such matters, is it? Onuki's glare told her otherwise, as Tsunade pulled in a deep breath and looked around at the gathered crowd. Everybody will disperse immediately, and there was a moment of hesitation as the people in the crowd look amongst each other. Immediately, quickly the civilians moved away from the woman, rushing away from the scene as the ninja followed suit. Soon it was just the Hokage, a few Anbu, and Tsuchikage and his escorts. Toya and Naruto. Onuki watched them leave with disdain. In his village, it only took one order to get things done. In comparison, the leaf seemed weak. Tsunade. Onuki's voice was a growl now as he pointed at Naruto. Who were the boy's parents? Tsunade was trapped. On one hand, she didn't want Naruto to find out this way. On the other, if she refused, it might start a war. Konoha and Ibo were on shaky enough terms as it was. She sighed deeply and looked at Naruto apologetically before turning back to the Tsuchikage. His parents were Minato Namikaze of Konoha and Kushina Uzumaki of Uzushigakurake. Naruto's eyes went wide as he stared at Tsunade. Onuki was essentially doing the same, but he had years of practice at now showing how shocked he was. Naruto was frozen solid as his mind just shut down. His idol, the man who sealed the QB inside of him, the man who technically he had based his fighting style on, the greatest Hokage of the village, hidden in the leaves, was his father. He saw God and Intaya look at him strangely before his world went black and he passed out. Naruto rested peacefully in the bed. For all the world, it would appear his mind was untroubled and carefree. Taiya lay next to him, a more worried look adorning her sleeping face as she curled up next to her unconscious boyfriend. Rain pattered lightly on the window as black clouds filled up the night sky. Only a faint trace of moonlight filtered into the dark hotel room. The air next to their bed seemed to warp and twist for a moment, and in a few seconds, a man appeared out of thin air. He looked down at the sleeping couple, his expression hidden by his orange swirl mask, as he stared intently at the blonde's face. His eyes narrowed to crinkling slightly distorted flesh on the right side of his face. Mentally, he covered up the blonde's whiskers and added a long while of billow of coat to his sleeping form. His eyes narrowed even further as the corner of his mouth twisted up into a small smile. Interesting. Toya woke up a few seconds later, rubbing her bleary eyes as she glanced around the small room. Not seeing anything unusual, she looked back down at her sleeping boyfriend with worry, slowly stroking the whiskers, adorning his cheeks before sitting back down next to him. His body was cold. This something that in Toya's world should never happen. Naruto was always warm. It was just a constant thing. Toya didn't know whether to take it as an omen, but she knew it wasn't anything good. And chapter 53.